depending on how late this goes, I'm probably going to punch out about 1:15 or so. And I can't hear a thing you're saying, Brent. Your lips are moving. Nope. Your lips are moving and you're not talking. Oh, I could read that. That's like one of those sideline cameras. And the commentators say, "Oh, well, we're not gonna translate that for you, but I'm sure you can figure it out."
That was me thinking Brent was the king of blab.
He is, but I think his kingdom's in revolt right now.
No, I think so.
Correct. The Greek
nope.
goddess Themis with Zeus to solve overpopulation.
Nope. Testing. Gremlins 1, 2, 3. Testing gremlins. Yeah, but your gremlins are working, Brent. Nope. Remember, Brent, this is where we just smile, grit our teeth, and say, this is one of the...
Try hitting resume recording. Okay, here we go. We are only 10 minutes late to talking about informal learning today in this blab session. So anybody that wants to jump in and chat with us, feel free. Informal learning is our topic today because we have all lost a dear friend and colleague, Jay Cross, who passed away last week. So I'm certain much of what we will be talking about are echoing his words and be exactly what we all need to hear. And quite honestly, I just really wanted to talk to a bunch of people that also may have known him or are in the industry and want to just talk about it. So maybe this turns into a therapeutic lab. Maybe it just turns into informal learning debate. I don't know where it's going to go, but let's just give it a shot. Oh, Bill Brandon, yes, I cannot hear you, but I can see you. You have to join. Click the open seat. Yeah, the only way we can hear or see you is if you jump into that open box. I think this way. There you go.
Yes. That way.
And I've accepted you, so you should be popping in any second.
Okay, cool. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Yeah, I can hear you. Hi, Bill.
Hi, y'all.
Hi, Bill.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time.
Got a little echo there from somebody. Maybe just turn down speakers a little bit. So anyway, so let's just kick this all off. What I thought we'd do was, unless somebody wanted, well, first of all, let me just say, Bill, I thought what you wrote in the Learning Solutions mag was absolutely fabulous.
Well, thanks. I used quotes from other people more so than me.
It was just really well done. And I just thought it was a very good collection of thoughts and, you know.
I knew Jay for a long time. I couldn't let it go without doing something.
Yeah.
We didn't always agree.
That was the beautiful thing about Jay, right? I mean, he and I didn't always agree on things either, but you know what? He was just the most amicable fella I'd ever met.
He was amicable, and at the same time, Jay was a man who needed adversaries, not enemies, adversaries, because that's the only way you could get a conversation started.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, I can't think of anybody who did not enjoy having a conversation with Jay. I don't think I ever heard it once. I heard a lot of people having heated conversations with him, but I don't think anybody ever would have said they did not enjoy a good conversation with Jay Cross. So anyways, so let's start with informal learning. Mark, why don't you give us a definition?
No pressure, right? I get to start.
Come on, get in there.
To me, the act of informal learning has always been either self-directed or, in a lot of cases, it's accidental. It's those things that you pick up along the way. And I'm reminded of that old phrase that said, never let university interfere with your education. So I think there was a lot more of that kind of learning that happened, outside of classes than actually happened inside of a class. We also used to say in the Army that you would probably learn more about tactics in the mess than you would on any exercise you ever participated in.
Yeah.
So now whether that was a function of in vino veritas or not, I don't know, but it certainly didn't hurt.
Oh, the Navy version of that by way of the Marines was no battle plan ever survives the first shot.
Yes, Murphy's Law of Combat Operations. We know it well.
Yeah, so it seems so. How does that fit then? There's a lot of conversation going on about informal learning right now online, and I think a lot of us still kind of struggle with where does it fit in the corporate learning structure in the workplace, right? There's always the two separate camps in these conversations, right? There's the academic side, higher ed, K through 12, and then there's corporate training and learning and whatnot. I think most of us are involved on the corporate side of things. So let's just kind of steer it that way. When you become an adult and you go out and you get a job, even when, I guess maybe this counts too, like when you're 16, get your first job, and you get trained in that job. How does informal fit into that?
Informal always seems to be the stuff that that your trainer never told you about, and all the things that you've picked up along the way. I think what I've seen in workplace L&D is that people are treating informal learning like it's new, and it's not. It's always been there. The issue, of course, is that people haven't acknowledged that it's taking place. And more importantly, they don't ascribe a particular value to informal learning and how that's supposed to work. And even us as learning professionals, we're probably just as guilty because we get so lost in the, hey, let's build a learning widget kind of mindset that we don't think as much about what are the day-to-day conversations that people are happening? What are the little gaps in knowledge or skills that are being filled along the way? So it's always been there. People are finally starting to wake up to it. But the fact that people are continuing to talk about it, to me, always says that we still haven't done a good job of actually addressing the issue.
I've asked Jane Hart to do a piece for us in December that addresses some of this. What's in the 70%? Now, the thing is, Jane and I don't necessarily see informal learning the same way. I asked her to write the article because I'm not sure exactly how she does see it. To me, informal is all that stuff that we used to, under the old behavior engineering model, classify as environmental. It's the way things run in companies. It's not something you're going to plan for. It's not something you're going to write up as part of your strategy, but it's there. So, for example, you've got tacit knowledge. That's the stuff that everybody picks up after a while on the job, that this is just the way it's done. It's not necessarily communicated socially. Sometimes it's what we call the school of hard knocks. And then the social is something that's more visible, and it's more supported by the technology now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see what
it's mostly just the technology has just exposed this whole idea of informal learning, right? I think we all know and sort of innately know that there's always been these informal conversations happening between coworkers, hallway conversations and whatnot. And we all know that that's where a lot of the really key learning takes place. But how do we make that connection? For me, it feels like there's this full circle with the technology. I look at it as a great thing. I don't really see it as an either or. I see it as this great way for us to iteratively, the informal learning helps us to do better at the formal learning, right? If we create something that's a a formalized training program that we know everybody has to learn, whether they like it or not, or whether they know they need to know it. There are certain things that we have to create formalized training programs. However they look or however you design them, that's maybe a different conversation. But at the higher level, it feels to me like once you put something like that into place, and then you get that tacit knowledge going, right? People take the course or take the information, they apply it in the workplace. They all start talking amongst themselves, and they figure out maybe that there's a little piece of it that should be changed that works better, right? I think in the way I see it with the technology is the technology gives us, our department, that ability to see all of that tacit knowledge happening, if they're using the tools, of course. And then we can go, oh, wow, we should be putting that into the formalized learning. And then we can cycle that back into the learning and keep that iterative process going.
So some good points from both of you there, if I may come in. I think, Bill, you're spot on, because I think back to, whenever, and we've all done it, we've all had to start a new job. And when you think about the new job, you have your induction training, whatever that might be. But if we think back to our new roles, and some of us have to think back further than others, of course, the stuff that you really pick up that makes a difference is that working alongside your colleagues. And it isn't just, how to operate this or how to do that. There is that element, but there's also the little tips and tricks. It's also the little shortcuts that you get. And I'm not sure whether you can capture some of that and bring that into formal learning anyway, because how do you build a framework unless you're doing simulations all the time? And is simulations the same as real life experiences? If you take a hospitality environment, a restaurant and a difficult customer, can you really replicate that in a simulation environment? Probably not, because a lot of it is about thinking on your feet, and just shadowing and mirroring someone, gives you great learning. What I worry about, certainly with, the whole pattern of informal learning at the moment, is are we trying to put something else into a box and trying to explain it? I think, the point very early on was spot on, was we've been doing this since year dot.
Yeah.
We've been doing it since year dot. And, are we just trying to put a label on it? Is it something that we're trying to monetize? I don't know is the answer, but that's my thought on it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And you've helped me clarify what I was trying to say. I think I don't think, when I talk about the iterative process and that the informal stuff happening and trying to integrate it into formal, I don't want to say that I'm putting it into a box and trying to define it and trying to wrap it in. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think acknowledging that it exists and looking for a way to leverage that is really what I'm trying to say. And I don't think we really know how best to do that, but the technology gives us a much easier way for us to peek inside to the real workings, right? If there's a forum or a conversation happening, let's say between engineers around the globe, they've got an online forum or something, some social network where they're talking, right? And if you can just be in on that conversation, now you've kind of embedded yourself and you can sort of hear those informal conversations and you can pick up on things and realize, wow, that's a really important story that person just told about that tough customer or that tough engineering problem. We should really try to capture that and incorporate it into, the next round of new hire orientation or whatever. That's kind of the way I see this, is it giving us the ability to be much more proactive in a corporate training realm than reactive, which is kind of how I see the difference between the legacy of corporate training versus today's reality and the expectations in the future.
Great.
My own background, I'm glad Marco mentioned restaurants, but my own background includes restaurants, back of the house, front of the house. Yeah.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
If you want to see a truly collaborative environment, work in a kitchen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's not anything that you can plan for. Some kitchens work well together and some don't.
Yeah.
How much the chef can influence that depends in part on the chef and in part on who the chef hires.
Yeah. You know what's, it's so funny that you bring that up. I just got finished listening to a podcast, and it's a podcast that's done by the guy that created the Spartan race.
Yeah.
And his latest podcast, he interviews a guy that just wrote a book called The Chefpreneur. And it's a book about how, what are the realities of starting a restaurant, right? And how can you be an entrepreneur in the restaurant business? And it's hilarious because all those things that you just mentioned, he touches on. And as I was listening to it, I just kept thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is like what he's talking about applies so directly to what we're doing. I mean, he talked about just being thrown into the fire basically in one restaurant job that he started and quickly realized he was sinking, and the head chef decided to tell somebody to go ahead and help him out. But the head chef put him in that role just to teach him, just to see, hey, can this guy actually do it? And it wasn't like he was fired, but it was like, hey, here's the reality of this job. Do you still want to do it? Can you cut it?
A lot of how your behavior in a kitchen and other places I've worked, engineering departments on ships, your behavior gets shaped by your coworkers.
Absolutely.
There are formal consequences for screwing up, and then there are the ones from your fellow workers, which are harder to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, kind of, wrapping all of this back around so there's that reality of the workplace, right? And then there is the job that corporate training professionals are tasked with. Where do the two how can we leverage the two, or should we?
Some of it is understanding. Some of it is on the part of the training instructional designer is understanding that environment, understanding the social network that exists in any workplace. If you pretend that social network does not exist, if you pretend that there are not consequences that are imposed by the people in the workplace, your training is in trouble. Because you can say, well, I'm going to teach you the right way to do this, and you're talking to people who may have done this for 20 years. They may have invented the very system that you're trying to introduce change into, and you really need to figure that out early. To me, that's how the informal part works. It's not something that's going to show up on a lesson plan somewhere. It's
right.
I used to say, you want to succeed as a corporate training manager, take people to lunch, spend time with them. I get into conversations sometimes with folks who say, well, I can't get any budget for this, or I don't know how to do ROI calculations. Well, have you ever taken your CFO out to lunch and asked him or her, how do you want me to do this? What's it take to prove this to you? Those are the things that some of that School of Hard Knocks, that's how I learned it, because I screwed it up enough times.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how often I'll ask people when I hear those same questions all the time. By the way, Bill, I can't get money. I can't get people to listen to me. I don't get any respect. People hate the training department, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's like, we want to try to move to e-learning, but I just can't get any of the technology. I'm like, well, okay, so who's your head guy? Who do you talk to? Who's on your team from the IT department? We haven't talked to IT yet. I'm like, okay, step one, take an IT guy to lunch and get to know your IT guy, because if you want to move to e-learning, nothing is happening technology-wise within your business unless you've talked to your IT people, period. So unless you can get them on your side, there's nothing going on. Or unless you become shadow IT, which is what they call it now, right? You fire up a software as a service system on your own, which, a lot of people are doing. But, it's a good way to go through the process and to get something done. But I think a much faster and more effective way would at least be to just get to know your IT department and figure out, hey, you know what, if we try to buy new software, if we try to get a new system in, what are the ropes, what are the hoops I have to jump through? What do I have to, take care of?
Do you think that and certainly so that scenario and that point, Bill, that you said about ROI, which always raises a head, do you guys think that actually is a fundamental, if you like, almost a human behavior challenge, in that we as humans, we don't like confrontation, and to get what we want, we have to ask the difficult questions, which typically can be confrontation, and therefore we're not asking those difficult questions. And the reason why I say that, and to maybe frame it a bit better, is I remember when I was in e-learning full time, and it goes back to my hospitality days again. I thought I came up with the killer course, and the killer course was a customer service course. And I went to, I think it was probably about 15 CFOs, financial directors. And I said to them, I've got a deal for you. I will create you free of charge an e-learning customer service course. All I ask from you is that you give me, because I know this course is going to work, after the year, I want you to give me a 1% payment from the increase on sales you will get from people undertaking this customer service course. And I thought to myself, that's a no-brainer. No cost, course bespoke to them, and all they need to give me is 1% of their sales uplift. And do you know what? No one bought it.
Yeah.
Not one of them. And I think, and in years after I caught up with a couple of those CFOs, and I said, why didn't you go for that? And they went, well, actually, it was probably because we were scared, because we thought, how much uplift will we get? And therefore, how much would we pay you? We could end up paying you 100 grand when the course only cost 20.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then the other fear is, how many businesses actually have an accounting practice in place where they're able to pay employees a special percentage of the profits?
Most companies do not have the metrics in place to allow them to make that kind of judgment or to make that kind of payment. It's
right
just not there. And if you get your CFO or whoever is in charge of accounting to be honest with you, they'll admit they can't do that. Sometimes I'm a little jealous of the engineering folks, because they can actually do ROI calculations, and you can pretty much say, if you made this capital investment, you got this kind of a return. But what we're doing is not so much capital investment. It's a lot more dodgy than that, harder to nail down. And on the conversation thing, I think part of what we have to do is learn to establish dialogue as the norm and not debate. Dialogue is, I'm working real hard to understand what it is you need. And I'd like very much for you to understand the challenges I have in trying to deliver that. If we set it up as a debate, which is what happens too often, there's a winner and there's a loser.
Exactly.
Nobody likes taking the chance of being the loser, and nobody likes being seen as a sore winner. So, I mean, that to me, it's sort of establishing the norm. The norm is we dialogue. We find out what's going on. I find out what's important to you. What doesn't mean I have to agree with it. It's a lot like my conversations that Jay used to be. I hope he didn't care whether I agreed with him or not. Actually, I think he did. He wanted to win, but that was what made the conversation possible. was to be able to say, Jay, I really want to understand what you're saying. It's just like, that's why I asked Jane Hart to write the article. I'm pretty sure there are going to be things she has to say that I'm not going to agree with at all. But it's important for me to understand what that is. And I think it's important for the readers of the magazine to understand what her position is. And I think she complains about nobody wants to talk about informal. I think people don't understand what she means when she says that.
Right.
No, and it's a spot on point, Bill. And I've had this debate with Jane, and I won't say we had a falling out. We probably agreed to disagree, if you like. But my point to Jane about it all is that, you know, and all credit to her and what she does. So I'm not going to knock her. But, you know, there are obviously levels of hierarchy in the world, and Jane is looking at it from her ivory tower. And my point to her was, when was the last time you were operational? You were at the coalface and understood what they were doing and saying and meaning. Yeah. It's all well and good speaking to, you know, the great L&D community, but they're a level up from operations. And it's interesting, Andrew Jacobs, a good friend of ours, has said, you know, definitely a metrics issue, going back to our last point, and L&D can't prove the right metrics. I agree, but operations can prove the metrics, because operations are doing it all day, every day. Yeah. And what goes on from a delivery perspective is generating metrics. It either generates revenue or it doesn't. You know, it's very simple in my mind. And I think we're in danger probably of isolating ourselves in L&D as opposed to ingratiating ourselves more operational perspective, because that's where things are done. Yeah,
it's the same thing that happened, 15, 20 years ago, right? When we first started talking e-learning, everybody was like, what the hell? You know, what do we want to do this e-learning? What are you talking about? You know, we've got classrooms that are working just fine. Everything's fine. You know, why do you want to ask us for $100,000 to, you know, build some new stuff when everything's working just fine? You know, it's the same thing when we go in and say, hey, we should be doing informal learning. And they're like, what? Who cares?
And if you go back, Brent, to 15 years ago, you know, and I started selling it 15 years ago in our startup, you know, we were trying to sell to trainers, because that's what they were called then. They weren't L&D managers, they were trainers.
Yeah.
And of course, no. And isn't it funny, once the message started to get out, who was actually making the decisions to buy from us? It wasn't the trainers. No. It was operations going to the trainers saying, I can't get these people in a classroom anymore. It's too much cost, or it's too much time, or we have too many locations. Is there another way?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. New thing called e-learning. So it wasn't L&D that made it happen. It was operations again.
Oh, and those conversations about why should we do e-learning, those aren't over. They are not over.
Not by a long shot.
I try real hard not to get trapped in this echo chamber we've got around e-learning. If you go out and talk to the people that are still, you know, in corporate training departments, and they still call them training departments, even if the official title says L&D, you talk to the people in there, it's training. They're still there, and I'm guessing, I won't invent a number, but there are an awful lot of people that are still in that position. One of the things I've discovered about the magazine is I look at, because we never take any articles down. Everything stays up forever. And I have gotten a little too far out on the leading edge in the last year with a lot of stuff on XAPI and some other topics, because what I discover is, looking at the Google Analytics, the articles that we published some time back that are on what I call the basics, instructional design, how to write a good quiz, all that, those things still get hundreds of readers every week. And so it has occurred to me, you know, in the last 4 months, I kind of looked at that and I said, you know, I've left a lot of the people behind, because they're going back finding this, it's still of value to them. So I need to pay some attention to, what is it that they don't know they don't know? What is it that they know they don't know, but they want to know? And those are things I got to go back to in the magazine coverage. We've got a conversation coming up in-house soon about that whole topic, and it also affects our, I think, our conference topics, conference speakers, and so on.
Yeah.
Because we have the same issues going on. You don't dare leave people behind. You leave them behind, they never get a chance to come along with you. So that's sort of where I am right now, at least in terms of content that we do in the magazine and in the guild. And I can't speak for DK, who runs the conferences, but I can speak for the magazine.
Yeah. So let's talk about this for a second. So we kind of know the struggles. We kind of understand what informal learning is, how we talk about it, and how the business doesn't know what in the hell we're talking about. So what happens next? Like when I look back historically and I kind of think about, okay, let's change the word informal learning to e-learning, and let's think back, and how did e-learning progress over the last 15 plus years? How is informal learning going to progress over the next 10, 15 years?
Probably stop calling it informal learning.
Yeah.
I talk to executives, and you're right, they glaze over because they don't understand informal learning. So when I look up and say it's like coaching, well, they get that.
Yeah.
They get that totally, and they go, we need some coaching. Yeah. We have a challenge because we haven't trained people to coach. So that one normally comes up, which is always, it goes back to our our point right at the very beginning. Do we need to train people to coach? Because I, like you, Bill, I was in the army, and I remember doing the formal stuff and then going into a battle zone, Ireland as it was then. We didn't learn the tactics, on the ground. You learned the tactics within your own team or within other teams that you actually physically had to go and meet and chat to in the mess or in the bar or wherever it might be. But that, in effect, I always viewed that as that was coaching. It might not have been, freely given. I had to ask for it, but that was coaching. So I look back now, if I was to put a modern label on it, that was informal learning.
I think there are a couple of things we can do to help the informal business along. Informal, it's not like it's going to progress. Informal has been around for millennia. So it is. What we can do, I think, is help people understand, be aware that a lot of what they know about their job, they learn on the job, and there are ways to do that better. There are, what would we call it, reflection, about how the day went and what did I do well and what could I do better, and how do I know that I did it better. I mean, that's a personal thing that you're not going to get from your trainer, from your manager, from your coach, from anybody else. People have to learn to be a little introspective and a little reflective about their own performance. And I think that's something that can be taught. I think that instructional designers need also to have some respect for the people doing the job. See, that's the thing. And you mentioned the Army. You had the same experience I did. When you were newly commissioned, if you were smart, which most of us weren't, you listened to your NCOs.
Yeah.
They were the ones that knew. Go ahead.
I was just waiting for Andrew to pop in here. Sorry.
Okay.
I think we've lost your connection, Marco.
Okay. Marco, are you still there? Can you hear us?
I think. Oh, he's moving.
Wave if you can
lost
hear
me.
us.
Yeah, we lost you there for a
I
second,
can
but
hear
now
you.
you're back. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bill, I agree with you. Doing it better. I think there's an added point as well. Doing it better and doing it wider.
What do you mean doing it wider?
Yeah. So the bit about, we did it on the job. or we're doing it on the job, but typically we do it on the job within our closed group. And it's about how can we do it better within our closed group, but also spread that wider within the business as opposed to just in our group.
Yeah. Some of this is, boy, this would drive people crazy. Basic sociology, understanding how a group works.
Yeah.
For a supervisor or a manager, to be able to understand how a group works and to be able to use that process. Like I said, it's not only taking people to lunch. It's not only listening to your NCOs. It's not only respecting the people that are doing the job and what they know, but it's knowing how to interact with them in a way that allows for making things better, not winning, not doing it my way, but making things better in their terms. And also making things better in terms of the business.
Right. So let me rephrase that question I was kind of originally going for. So yes, informal learning has been around for millennia. Yes, informal learning will continue to go on as is. And yes, Ellen, people will still learn without training departments and without an L&D department. I think we can all agree that that's possible and will happen. But with all of that said, does the training department change, and does it begin to look different because of all of these things? Because technology has now exposed this idea of collaborative learning, utilizing technology in ways that we were never able to do it before, right? Even though informal learning has been around for millennia, in the early days, it was just face-to-face was the only way you could have a collaborative conversation with somebody. Now you can collaborate with anybody around the world with multiple people, the way we're doing this right now, right? And so does this change what corporate training looks like, no matter what we call it?
It changes the norms to me. There will be certain things that will always look the same way, and there are certain things that might look the same way, but they're really different. They're operating different. The process changes. I think it's a change in method and a change in process. And I'm not sure that I can put anything more carefully defined, carefully articulated than that, because there are so many different organizations and so many different situations that everyone is going to be a little different. You think about the way you train a surgeon, because you want to be sure your surgeon knows what she's doing, and the way you train a fry cook in the back of a restaurant. They may be pretty different.
Yeah.
A fry cook can make mistakes. You'd rather your surgeon didn't.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but I think so. I mean, it's just on different scales, right? I mean, let's whittle that down to the basic elements, right? I mean, for a surgeon, what we want the surgeon to do is to be able to practice in a safe environment, as often as they can, to master that particular skill of surgery. And we certainly don't want that surgeon mastering it on live, humans. So we simulate it somehow to give them as close of an opportunity, as close of an experience as they will have in the real world. Same with the line cook in the back, except since there is less to risk, you can tell a line cook, a brand new one, just toss him in and say, go for it, let him fail, and then say, okay, let's learn from that experience and figure out, what you don't know. And I'll have this other guy next to you teach you all that stuff that you didn't know before. It's exactly the same thing. It's just on a different scale, right?
To a point.
Yeah.
The line cook can toss what he did in the trash and make another batch. not so easy for the
Well, that's
doc.
what I'm saying, right? So let me be clear. So I'm stripping it back to its barest, most essential elements, right? The line cook needs to practice. The surgeon needs to practice. The line cook has less to lose when a mistake is made, and therefore they can do that practice in a live situation, and they'll still be able to recover. The surgeon needs to practice, but because the stakes are much higher, needs to practice in a simulated environment as close to the real thing as possible, and then move into doing it for real once they get a little bit closer to mastery. Yes?
Yeah, and some of it too is the complexity of the skill involved and the components of it. I remember, I don't know if they still do this. Years ago, I heard of some surgeons who, for example, used to tie flies as fishing as a means of understanding how to do a better job of suturing, do a better job of closing up a wound so that it didn't bleed after it was.
And being fast at it.
And being fast. My wife was a nursing student. She learned to give shots by practicing on oranges.
Yeah.
You know, that type of thing. Because I guess feels about the same putting the needle in. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there are some skills that there's more layers of complexity than others. I think with a line cook, a lot of the complexity is tied up in the senses, what they can smell, what they can hear, the sensation of heat and temperature. And I don't know that, for example, somebody who's putting an engine on an airplane, which is also a critical job that you want them to get right, I don't know that the smell and the taste and all that comes into it as much.
I would say yes.
Yeah. Touch, probably. Hearing, maybe.
Smells, definitely.
For a mechanic?
Yeah.
Yep, maybe
Listen, I drove Volkswagens for a really, really long time as a kid, and I can tell you that you can smell exactly what's wrong with the car when something starts to go wrong. You very quickly learn to distinguish between very different smells, and you know exactly what's either going to happen or what you need to fix. So I can only imagine it's the same way with most other mechanical products.
Oh yeah, my old steam engineering plants on the ships, I could tell by certain smells. I'd come down in a space, and you just knew by the sound, the vibration, the smells that everything was okay, or better go look.
Something's not right.
Something's not right.
Yeah. But that's the kind of stuff you only learn from experience, right? And so when we're talking about training departments, I think the real value that we can help give to businesses is figuring out, as opposed to somebody having to get those experiences real time, which takes a lot longer and a little bit more risk involved. How is it that you can expose somebody to as many experiences as possible in a safe environment, in a compressed way, so that somebody can get up to mastery more quickly?
Yeah.
That's where I kind of see our value. I guess it's more of a statement than anything else. I mean, I think if we can start showing businesses that that's what we can do, not from a, not telling them that, oh, I got this ISD process and I'm an instructional designer, and if we do this course and that course, it's like, no, it's like, listen, it's taking your guys 6 months to get from, new to, proficient, and then another 2 years to get to mastery. What if we can compress new to proficient down to, a month or two, and then that to mastery, drop that down to 1 year or 2 years? That's value, right? And that's business value.
Yeah.
So we're running up on and being here an hour, despite all of my technical issues I had early on. Let's have some final words. What are the words of wisdom around what we like to call, or what our industry is discussing, around informal learning? I'll think for a moment.
Anytime the phrase words of wisdom comes up, I get shocked.
Okay, don't give us words of wisdom. Give us your straight out and out hardcore point of view. Foolishness. We'll take that.
Oh. I'm sort of hoping Marco will jump in.
I'm struggling.
Maybe we all do, because it is the fact that the informal is stuff that you will not see unless you're looking for it. And you may not see, you may not understand until you look and think and reflect for a while. And then you have to figure out, what do I do about this? Sometimes, maybe, it's a matter of trying to capture that tacit knowledge and find a way to work it into job aids, or the instruction, or even the design of the job, or the tools that are provided to do the job. Because I think what we miss a lot of times is, when we think about learning, we only think about instruction and didactics and so on. And sometimes maybe what we need to be thinking about is the total performance, the accomplishments, and what would it take to improve the accomplishments that people are achieving on the job. Sometimes it's not a matter of instruction. Sometimes it's a matter of changing the tools. Sometimes it's a matter of changing the process or the procedures or the administration. Sometimes it's a matter of changing the hiring process. Because if you're hiring the wrong people, I don't care how you train them, they're never going to get it right. And I know it sounds a little harsh. There are people who, there are certain jobs they're not going to be able to do, and you've got to get the right person in there. That's my thoughts on it. It's more complex than just instruction. You have to look at the whole system. And I know that people accuse me of wanting to boil the ocean every time I say that. But sometimes you have to build kind of a big fire and boil some of the ocean.
Yeah, I think so. I think that goes to your comments around building relationships too, because you know, whenever I start to go down that path that you're on, Bill, people say, but that's not training's responsibility. That's an OD person, or that's HR, or, you know, that's their responsibility. What is our responsibility, and what should I, as a training manager, you know, be doing, you know, differently? And sometimes I step out of the conversation, and other times I'll try to work it a little bit more. But to me, it's all about the relationship building that you're talking about. I mean, getting anything done, you've got to build relationships with the people who are in that ecosystem with you, and figure out how you can all work together to move the business as a whole instead of each department independently.
Exactly. You can't always allow yourself to be put in a box. You can't always. I worked for a place once that my manager told me he was worried about me, because I used to go in, if I had an idea, I'd go find some vice president that was sort of in charge of that area, and go get him a cup of coffee and sit down with him for a while. And he says, you know, that's embarrassing. He says, you know, we're not supposed to do that around here. And I think what he meant was, it was embarrassing to him. Because he hadn't done it. But sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to go find the right person and sit down with them with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's our business. I'll say it a million times, and I'll say it again. Our business is about people, not technology. And the technology just helps enable and expand and scale up the people stuff, but it all starts with the people and dealing with people on all those different levels. Marco, you got anything to add in closing?
Yeah. So just there, you said it starts with the people. Just an added point: it starts and ends with the people. You haven't got if you haven't got the people or the right people doing the right things, then you don't have a business. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Well, you will do for a short time. It's not got any longevity. I think, and we've mentioned it a few times, all of us actually. And again, I go back to when I was younger, the very good coaches, line managers. And it's only in the last 12 months or so that I've come to realize what they meant. Right? But they used to say to me on occasions, now go away and think about that. So, of course, you know, I would go away and probably think about it, but just think about it. So now in modern terminology, and as I said, we've used it a few times, all of us, is the word reflection. And I think it's even more paramount in today's society, because I'm sure we're probably all the same. We probably hear on a weekly basis, we're talking to somebody who says, I'm too busy. I can't do that. I'm so busy. And, you know, I work with a number of people who run companies, and I've encouraged them to take just half an hour a day, as an example, to go away and reflect. And it's interesting, you know, from reflection and the feedback from those people and myself doing reflection, actually how much more productive you are, or how much better or easier something might be. Because, yes, it might be painful to find that half an hour or an hour to reflect. But boy, doesn't it make your life actually easier, more simpler. So for me, going back to your question, Brent, you know, the word reflection, the ability to reflect on something, whether it's something that needs to be actioned, or actually it's like this conversation here, this blab. I will go and reflect on this blab, on some of the things that both of you have said, and think about, might I be able to use some of that? Do I need to tweak what I'm doing, or you know, oh, that gives a different perspective on something. You know, it's just that ability to reflect, as opposed to just come off and never think about this call again. So reflection.
I agree, and I think the bill kind of sparked something, and you've just kind of sparked something, and in closing, and I'll say that, you know, that idea of reflection is outstanding, but I think at a much higher level, what we're all talking about is this, that with the workplace changing, with technology changing, there are roles and responsibilities that are changing. And I think it's got a little bit to do with control too, right? I mean, I think in the past, employees would file in the industrial age, right? You would file into your business, and your expectation was not that you were going in to learn, but you would walk in expecting to be taught. We were expecting to be taught, expecting to be trained, and you didn't feel like it was your responsibility. Today, a lot more of the learning responsibilities is hoisted on the shoulders of the employee, and for a lot of good reasons, because with all of the new technologies, they're able to take control and not only find more information and get more of the information they need to be productive, but they can also teach and use the technology like webinar technology or blab or social media. You can also take what you've learned and share it back. And so the technology gives us that loop, and that's something that's very different. So I think teaching the next generation of employees how to take responsibility for their own learning, I think it's something that we're only just recently starting to think about and touch on. And I think that is a little bit of what we talk about when we say informal learning. I haven't really thought it too clearly out in my head, but just hearing the both of you mention that reminded me that it's something I'd been writing about before.
Brent, you've got a case in point for exactly what you described, which is the bring your own device policy that has been running around for the last 18 months. I've always argued people in L&D departments and IT in particular, or allegedly it was IT, saying, no, you can't bring your own devices to work. I think it was all about, we don't want you to do that because we will be relinquishing control. And you know, I've had this argument so many times, and when you come up with the counter argument that says, well, they're doing it anyway, whether they're doing it or not, they're doing it anyway. It's interesting how you then get a different take on it. But I think that's a case in point to exactly what you've just said, that whole BYOD policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's just a part of it, right? That's just one of the pieces that's starting to, it's the beginning of that wave, right? Of the employee actually now finally having a lot more control than they used to have. So then the technology is enabling that, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, we call it, people in L&D have started to call it personalization, haven't they? But I actually think it's bigger than that. It's individuals to take ownership, and I use the word ownership, of their own learning.
Yep.
They've really not, you as a department, you're not going to move fast enough or be agile enough for me. So I'll take on what you give me. But for those that really want to progress, they're the ones that are actually doing their own additional.
Yep. Bill, anything to add?
Well, a lot of what Marco just said, the way that the younger people are now, and I sound like an old guy when I say that. I think there's less deference for authority, for the people that have been around, less acceptance of who's this guy up in front of the class, who's he to tell me?
Right.
They will go out and find it on their own. They are better at using the social media. I think they're more aware of their environment maybe than we were in the past. And so, I have some hope on that basis for things moving forward and actually getting better. I have a lot of faith in people.
And that's awesome. And I think with that, we should wrap this up because I know you guys probably have other things to do, but I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me, or else I would have been here talking to the camera all by myself.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to see you both. Very, very unexpected. And I appreciate your time though, for sure. Let's do it again.
All right. Nice to meet you, Marco.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.